Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a Diablo and Overwatch news wrap-up video where we give our thoughts on the happenings of the week. Let's start with Diablo news. If you're just here for Overwatch, and you can skip ahead to the time indicated above. So the biggest news in the Diablo world this week actually isn't about Diablo at all, but rather its biggest competitor, Path of Exile. A week ago, after months of speculative competition with Diablo 3's Necromancer pack, the newest expansion for Path of Exile released. And for months, Path of Exile fans have been saying that the expansion would absolutely crush Diablo 3's Necromancer pack. So much more content, it's free, it puts Diablo to shame. Well, now that it's actually launched, how has that all shaped up? We're now a week into the launch of the Path of Exile expansion, and the community response has been very positive. When the Necromancer pack launched for Diablo 3, the response was mostly positive. But there certainly was a negative segment of the community, a vocal minority, you can say. And it does seem that there was more negativity surrounding the Necromancer pack than towards this new Path of Exile expansion. And it seems that the two different pricing models, $15 for one and free plus microtransactions for the other, played a big part in that, and hopefully this is a lesson for Blizzard moving forward with a new Diablo game. On the topic of negativity, one thing that I found actually kind of fascinating was on the launch of the expansion, the Path of Exile servers were overloaded, and they basically had their own Error 34. For those who remember, when Diablo launched back in 2012, there were so many people trying to log on at the same time that the servers got overloaded, no one was able to play, they were all met with the dreaded Error 34. Fast forward several years, we have this launch of the Path of Exile expansion, and something on a smaller scope but still very similar happens, and there was nowhere close to the same negative visceral reaction as there was back at the launch of Diablo 3. So while I do find it interesting that one game got all the hate for that and the other game does not, I think it's very plainly explained by the fact that the developers of Path of Exile are an indie team. So they're working with indie resources versus Blizzard, one of the probably wealthiest game developers out there. So when it happens to a small indie team, you're more understanding. When it happens to a big dev like Blizzard, there's no excuse. And honestly, in the grand scheme of things, it's first world game developer problems that, oh no, so many people are trying to play my game that the servers are crashing. So that's certainly a testament to the popularity of Path of Exile. And on the topic of popularity, once the expansion launched, there were so many people streaming Path of Exile and so many huge crowds watching Path of Exile streams that continued on into the following days, and it really eclipsed the number of viewers that Diablo 3 had on the launch of the Necromancer pack. We also have some pretty incredible Steam metrics that Path of Exile had its all-time player base peak at almost 100,000 players online, and that's just through Steam. We have to remember that there's a separate client for those who don't want to play through Steam, and in fact it's argued to be the better experience, but I suspect that a lot of people, and a lot of new people, came to the game through Steam, so you can argue that maybe there was double that number online, or it's really anyone's guess. It could be maybe 150. How many people really use the launcher versus Steam? Of course, Blizzard doesn't share the numbers for Diablo, so we can't quite compare figures there, but regardless of comparison, it looks excellent for Path of Exile. And then the last numbers we'll take a look at are some Google Trends metrics. Google Trends compares search interest. How many people are Googling about something, which is a pretty fair reflection of a game's popularity. When you compare games like League of Legends and Dota and World of Warcraft, everything matches up, everything lines up with what you would expect. So over here I'm comparing Path of Exile online game versus Diablo 3 video game. Now, I know some of you are going to argue, well, it's because people are searching for Diablo 3 without the Roman numeral. The Google software is intelligent enough to group together those searches. That's why it recognizes Diablo 3 video game versus Diablo 3 search term. Similarly with Path of Exile, it's going to include PoE. It's going to recognize what we are searching for. And if we look at the red line, which is Diablo, you can see where it peaked with the launch of the Necromancer pack and has been slowly petering off. We had the start of the season, which gave another small crest, and now we are just on the cusp of the launch of the Path of Exile expansion. These metrics are delayed by a few days, but you can see that this dotted line here reflects Google's expectation, its projection of where things are going. That said, do note that I've seen these projections often and they tend to overestimate, but regardless, even right now you can see that they're almost neck and neck, that the peak interest in the Necromancer pack is just slightly higher than the current interest in Path of Exile, which does seem to be continuing an upward trend. So it does look like Path of Exile's expansion, overall, looking at all of our different numbers and metrics, is more popular than the Necromancer pack. Now, obviously I have a bias towards Diablo, I have a bias towards Blizzard and Diablo 3, but numbers don't lie. But what do you folks think about all this? I have yet to have a chance to try out the Path of Exile expansion, but if you've tried it, what do you think? How do you think the expansion compares to the Necromancer pack, and do you think it's even fair to compare them? Now, to transition from talking about Path of Exile to Diablo, we have an idea from the community that has been proposed in the past, but it's never a bad time to bring it up again because it's a fantastic idea, and that's to adopt an idea from Path of Exile. In Diablo 3, that idea would basically be the ability to have themed rifts, or rift mods. In other words, you can find a Greater Rift key that has modifiers on it, and that will affect the monsters and loot inside the rift. So for example, here's an idea that was conceived by Reddit users Lord Anku and that dude from Arkansas. We have the King's Assassin Rift of Haste. The idea here is that these prefixes and suffixes are randomly generated just like most things in Diablo, and they all apply some modifier. So the King prefix here would greatly increase monster health and damage, would give elites 2 additional affixes, but you'd get 100% more progression and experience from killing these monsters. The Assassin prefix would render monsters invisible, but they take 25% more damage. I do hope that means just invisible until they attack you, because otherwise that's ugh. And then the Haste suffix would give you a 2-minute timer before you start losing 10% of your health per second, but gain 10% resource per second. Again, this is just one example, but I think the idea of rift modifiers is awesome. But what do you folks think? And what are your ideas for possible rift modifiers? On to Diablo news, we've got Gamescom coming up later this month, and Blizzard has revealed its lineup of live streamers that it's flying in or otherwise bringing into Gamescom for Overwatch, World of Warcraft, StarCraft 2, Hearthstone, Heroes of the Storm, and that is all. Diablo is markedly absent. Some people are upset by this, some people are disappointed, some are understanding, and I myself fall into the understanding camp. You see, back around March, Blizzard invited a bunch of Diablo influencers from around the world, and they flew them in at their expense to a Diablo summit. They gave us an amazing look at the Necromancer with a chance to ask direct questions to the devs and provide direct feedback. If Blizzard has nothing to show for Diablo at Gamescom, then not only would it kind of be a waste of money to pay for flights and hotels of influencers, but also it would in no way live up to the awesome Diablo summit, so the influencers that they invite might even be disappointed. It is unfortunate that it seems nothing Diablo related is happening at Gamescom, but honestly, bringing in influencers for no reason other than just to have something to show, like hey, here's a streamer, would just create false hype and lead to disappointment, like last year. Moving on, I wanted to highlight from the community some excellent analysis conducted by Reddit user Barbnut. He busted out some statistics to examine Season 10. He compared the Wizard and the Barbarian, which back then were the strongest and the weakest class. And the short version is that he found that the Wizard is 11 Greater Rifts stronger than the Barbarian. This equates to about 5.62 times more damage. According to his analysis, the average Barbarian has a Greater Rift cap of around 83. In other words, your average Barbarian player could expect to go no higher than an 83 Greater Rift. And he concludes that Barbarians need to be buffed by about 10 Greater Rift levels of power in order to compete with Wizards. But what are your thoughts on all this? Do you feel it's more difficult to push Greater Rifts solo as a Barbarian rather than other classes? And lastly, for our Diablo coverage this week, we're gonna go to our community complaint corner. What are we complaining about this week? We're complaining about bounty bags dropping on the floor if your inventory is full. Has this happened to you that you're in a public game, you're doing a rift, your inventory is full, someone turns in the bounty from another act, and your bounty bag drops on the floor, you don't realize it, and goodbye forever. So the suggestion here is to make the bounty bags like the challenge rift rewards that are mailed to you. This way you never have to worry about losing it. We're also complaining about cursed chests not spawning enemies fast enough. This can make it difficult to not only complete the actual cursed chest, but even the achievements surrounding cursed chests. The secret to this is you need a class and a build that's well suited for screen clearing. We're talking about multi-shot Demon Hunter and Wave of Light Monk, for instance. We're complaining about not enough new content coming to Diablo 3, despite just getting the Necromancer pack. What I find kind of funny is that Diablo 2 is often held as being so much better than Diablo 3 that it's... Some people say that Diablo 2 is more popular today than Diablo 3 is. I don't know where they're getting these numbers, but Diablo 2 did not receive as much new content as Diablo 3 did. Now you can argue that, well, Diablo 2 was so good that it didn't need new content, but that really doesn't address the complaint about just people always expecting new stuff to be churned out. And I think this really points to the shift in the gaming landscape over the past decade. I remember a time when a game was released and you can keep playing it for years even if it didn't receive new content. But nowadays, with monetization, because it's really thanks to monetization that we do see ongoing continuous development of games and new things being added all the time, DLCs, expansion packs and all that, we've now come to expect new content all the time. And so our attention spans are shortened, and if a game doesn't keep getting new stuff, then we're drawn to other games. Once again, something to keep in mind for Diablo 4. And lastly, we're complaining about the shield pylon causing too much lag. When you get to higher greater rifts and monsters aren't dying instantly, when you get a lot of different damage effects and damage over time effects getting stacked onto enemies, it causes server lag, and in this case on the shield pylon there's a reflex damage effect on it, which it was cool when it was added, but I don't think anyone thought about the deeper implications. The damage is insignificant, particularly in higher greater rifts, and all it does is add more damage calculations that cause lag. But what do you folks think about these complaints? Which are legitimate? Which are not? And do you have any additional complaints of your own? Alright, on to our Overwatch news. The summer games have begun, and with it we've got a bunch of sexy new skins. Oh my. Speaking of, let's take a closer look at some of these skins. Blizzard's attention to detail is just absolutely amazing. If you take a look at McCree's belt buckle, it typically says BAMF. That's assumed to stand for Badass Mofo, but on this skin it's SAMF. Now my first thought was, because he's a lifeguard, it's Safe Ass Mofo. But a lot of people think it's Sexy Ass Mofo. What do you folks think? You can see on his lanyard it says High Tide Patrol. Nice High Noon reference. His gun is a Desert Seagull instead of a Desert Eagle. And something very minor that really astonishes me that Blizzard bothered to do. His heels actually separate from his flip-flops as he takes steps. Blizzard could have just done what everyone does and keep the flip-flops glued to his feet, but they built in the physics for the separation of flip-flop and heel. If you take a look at Dad76, the Grill Master here, his gun is actually an assault rifle. Not an assault rifle, a salt rifle. Now I just need to highlight a theory that was posted before the skins were revealed. This was posted by Reddit user Nut of Death. And basically, when everyone was speculating that the Mercy skin would be something like a lifeguard Mercy or some kind of sexy beach-themed Mercy skin, he proposed that the skin we would get would actually be based on Nike, Goddess of Victory. He felt it was a good fit for the Summer Games theme, since the goddess is actually used in Olympic medals as a visual depiction. And it turns out this basically was the Mercy skin that we got, so well predicted on his behalf. Now, on the topic of skins, I need to call back to something that we covered in a previous video, and that had to do with, in the Doomfist reveal video, we saw some odd guns on Soldier 76 and Sombra. It turned out that those guns were from the skins for the Summer Games. So Blizzard actually had snuck in a teaser of what the skins were going to be. Now, in other Overwatch news, we've also had a recent update to the public test region, where a new game mode and a new map has been added. The game mode is Deathmatch, and the new map is a French castle where Widowmaker lives. Now, I was surprised because in the past, Blizzard said no, we're never gonna add Deathmatch or Team Deathmatch. But it seems testing out fun game modes in the arcade and the server browser has changed Blizzard's mind. So there's one mode that's a free-for-all up to 20 kills, and when it comes to getting your reward, your loot box for arcade wins, as long as you're in the top half of players, you'll get your loot box. And then the other version is a team deathmatch. This one's only up to 30 kills, which seems pretty low. But Mercy plays a very interesting role where if she resurrects teammates, that actually takes points away from the enemy team. Not only do we have the new castle map on which to play deathmatch, but many of the existing maps have been reworked to accommodate deathmatch. Now, even if you don't care so much about deathmatch, this is still amazing news, because having a place where it's just about killing people will hopefully send all of those people that queue into your comp games or into your quick play that aren't team players, that all they want to do is kill the enemy team and not play the objective. Hopefully they'll all be funneled into deathmatch, and it's going to create a better team experience in the regular game. Now, on the topic of the new map, let's take a bit of a closer look at it. It is Chateau Guillard. It is the Widowmaker family estate. So thanks to this new map, we learn a little bit more about Widowmaker. We already knew that her real name is Amélie Lacroix, but Lacroix was her husband's name, that husband that she assassinated. We now know that her maiden name is Guillard. And if we look around the map, we find some boarding passes for a Danielle Guillard. So it's assumed here that Danielle is probably Widowmaker's alias, because she's now presumed dead. She couldn't go back to using her old name Amélie Lacroix, so it seems this is the pseudonym she's adopted. Now, also on this map, we can find a laptop with what appears to be an open email. It's written in French, and what it reads is, at the top, nouveau message, that's new message. Objet, votre réservation, that's subject. I thought it would be sujet, but subject, your reservation. The two buttons, répondre, reply, transférer, I guess, forward. And then the message reads, Bonjour, Madame Guillard. Hello, Miss Guillard. Nous vous confirmons par ce message qu'une limousine vous attendra à l'aéroport Nice-Côte d'Azur à 21h30. We're confirming to you by this message that a limousine will be waiting for you at the Nice-Côte d'Azur airport at 9:30 p.m. Le trajet entre Nice et Monaco devrait durer environ 30 minutes. The voyage between Nice and Monaco should last around 30 minutes. Vous pouvez évidemment modifier cette réservation à votre convenance. You can obviously modify this reservation at your convenience. Nous restons à votre entière disposition pour toute autre demande. We remain at your entire disposition for any other request. And then looking at the boarding pass, everything is already translated there. And apart from a lot of bottles of wine, we can of course find this wedding photo of Amélie and Gérard, her husband. But the new map and game mode isn't all that's new on the PTR. We also have some balance changes. Most of these were either hinted at or explicitly discussed in the past, and we covered it in a previous video, but now Junkrat can hold 2 concussion mines at a time. His Riptire now moves 30% faster. For Orisa, her bullets travel faster and her barrier is larger. Roadhog can now heal while moving, and he has 50% damage reduction while healing. And Widowmaker now has a shorter cooldown on her grappling hook, and her Venom Mine basically marks a target, making them visible through walls. A stealth update happened to the Numbani map, where all of the Doomfist exhibit stuff is now gone. Now it's just sort of Numbani history, as well as things about Ify and Orisa. I'm actually gonna miss the old Doomfist exhibit. I just love seeing those posters, and the gauntlet on the payload was really cool. Now all that's gone and replaced, but what do you folks think? Moving on to a quick talk about esports. During the Overwatch World Cup, Team South Korea, during the World Cup group stage, they collectively played every single hero throughout their matches, apart from Symmetra, and still went 4-0 every single match. This proves one of two things. Either that the Koreans are so much better than everyone else that it doesn't even matter if they play suboptimal compositions, or it means that the meta isn't as important as we all want to think it is. And lastly, I just wanted to highlight this hilarious video about a dude got his dad to reenact all the dances in Overwatch, all the dance emotes. It's a YouTuber named Nick Luciano. I'll drop a link in the description for you to check out the video. It is endearing. And that wraps up this week's video. Do remember though to leave a comment on your thoughts about any of the stories that we've covered this week. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo and Overwatch content.